This was 8 days ago in Otara, the Otara markets, when this group from Destiny Church came on board to protest Chippy being there. Let's have a little bit of a reminder as to what happened on that day.
No more Labour paints! No more Labour paints!
Raucous Freedoms NZ supporters giving it to Labour in spades.
No more black roll! No more black roll!
Why is it spades? It's from the cards. Why isn't it clubs or hearts? Or I don't know. I've never thought about that before. Sorry for the tangent already.
You braved picks, but eventually, though, Labour's campaign photo op was successfully derailed. Chris Hipkins keeping his chin up.
It's democracy in action, my friend.
He left the markets a little early.
That's an important comment, right? So at that time, it was democracy in
A
action.
little more philosophical later on.
Protest is an absolutely legitimate part of election campaigns. I just hope that those who are doing protest won't drown out the voices of those who want to engage positively in the campaign.
Do you feel safe? Are you looking to change the campaign approach this year?
I'm really committed to getting out and about, meeting New Zealanders, talking to New Zealanders about the issues that are at stake in this election.
So there we go. So that was stage one. Also some commentary from political commentators on that same night as well. Bryce Edwards said,
I think a number of us commentators are very worried about the rising divisiveness, toxicity and nastiness in politics at the moment.
But he doesn't think this protest was out of line.
It's the right of the public to be able to chant against politicians and to express their dissatisfaction. It looked like the free expression of political opponents against a government.
so that was the feeling on that date, right? And then, of course, the very same protesters. Oh, that's not the right one. Hang on. What's that one? 253. That's not the right one. That's the one there. And then, of course, no, I might not have had the other one. We had, I haven't got it. We had the situation yesterday where Christopher Luxon was heckled, right? I think I can probably find it. Sorry, guys. 15 seconds. Is it 15 seconds? So we'll just go to here. So the situation yesterday with the same individual from the same group heckling Christopher Luxon,
say to you, I think what you're seeing is a very unstable coalition of chaos.
Oof, speaking of chaos,
You've actually got it.
this guy popping up to heckle Christopher Luxon.
Sorry,
We
mate.
haven't seen you in Otara, Mr. Luxon.
I think you're a candidate for Vision, right?
We're part of Freedoms New Zealand.
A fringe party prone to causing commotion with the Chris's,
You're saying you're the better of the two Chris's, Mr. Luxon.
not letting up despite efforts to pull him down.
Well, the real Mr. Chris Luxon.
Oh, you're a
please
funny
stand
guy,
up.
mate. You're a real funny guy. You're nice and
you
shady,
say you're
buddy.
a Christian, but then you're not changing anything with abortion.
Yeah, mate.
You're not doing anything with.
Why don't we come and
transgender.
chat to you
We've got
afterwards if
families
you
that
want to
are
be
concerned, Mr.
respectful?
Luxon.
But you're not being respectful.
Luxon giving up.
I'm just asking, will the real Mr. Chris
Okay,
Luxon
sorry,
please
we'll go
stand up?
inside because
Yeah, I'm asking for Mr. Luxon.
So then we'll just go to this second part of the clip, which is an understanding that there could need to be police involvement for what's going on at the moment. So let's have a listen to that part of the clip.
Almost certainly after the parliamentary protests, it is clear that Brian Tamaki and his lot will do everything they can to disrupt. And the police have been planning for it. In a ministerial briefing, they said that there had the potential to be threats to the general election and to some of the candidates, and that would require a significant response. Chris Hipkins said today that that could even look like cops on some of the candidates, which is a total shame that such a vocal yet tiny minority is able to disrupt the democracy that we've come to know.
And finally, today as well, comments from Chippy. So remember, it was democracy in action a week and a half ago. It was fine whatever a week and a half ago. Same group of people protesting yesterday to Christopher Luxon, and this was the response from Chippy.
It's clear that Brian Tamaki and his mob are very determined to disrupt the election campaign. Ultimately, that's anti-democratic. They're denying all New Zealanders the right to hear from all political parties. Christopher Luxon is absolutely entitled to hold a press conference. He's entitled to share his views with the New Zealand public, and the New Zealand public are entitled to hear those views as well. So same with me, same with every other political party leader. I'm not going to go around disrupting other party leaders or other parties' press conferences. I think a party that thought it had any shot of getting into Parliament wouldn't be doing that. This is just Brian Tamaki and his team trying to make a lot of noise and disrupt everybody else.
So I wanted to play all of those clips, all of those short clips, to give us all a little bit of a history lesson or remembrance. 8 or 9 days ago, part of democracy. This is what we do. Protest is an important part of it. Same people, a week and a bit later, this is a danger to democracy. Now, we in the past have been supporters of loud, raucous protest. I think about Victoria Jacobs at the Julian Batchelor situation with her whistle. I can think about the loud voices at the Posey Parker. We're in support of that, right? We have a similar vibe here, but for want of a better word, and I'm not dragging you necessarily into this, Simon, but for me and Chewy, kind of, but for the other side, do we need to stay consistent and go, well, it's a part of it, it's just how it goes? Or is it different with democracy? Sorry, is it different with politics? Because Christopher Luxon was speaking to the country about an upcoming election, yet Posey Parker was speaking to a person about a personal ideology. And where does that sit? How about we throw you the ball first of all, Simon, so you're the guest, and you clear it all up for us, and we don't have to do any thinking about this.
It'll only take me about 3/4 of an hour. You got that?
Okay, fine.
I think there are differences, and I'm not sure that's where I'd make the split. But before I get to that, I did want to go back and just mention that this is not something that's especially new in the last couple of weeks. We know that in this country, since 2020, there has been a growing movement of really vocal, noisy, disruptive opposition to the government on a range of issues, and they have been as aggressive as they possibly could be without starting to hit people. And we know that was particularly aimed at Jacinda Ardern, to the extent that it became clear that the old wonderful thing that used to happen in New Zealand politics of politicians would go into shopping malls and would be able to do a tour of shopping malls, and go to schools and do those sorts of things. We know that those things actually got stopped under Jacinda Ardern because they were simply not possible anymore, because there were people screaming at her, throwing things at her, shouting, abusing, and making the whole process impossible. That isn't a good thing. That's really not a good thing. I think Amelia Wade's comment that in our democracy we need the space for democracy to function, I think that's a really good point to make. And we now find ourselves in the election campaign where we know that there are political forces who are intent not on political debate, but simply on destroying the process. It's very hard to know how you manage that, because you absolutely do want to allow people to be protesters. I've been a protester a lot in my life, and protest has to be disruptive, or it's not really protest. It's not effective as protest. So you've got to allow that process. So unlike Hipkins, my view of what happened in the Otara market and what happened to Luxon and Botany is a little bit flipped in a way. I thought Luxon was a very minor thing. It was funny. Luxon handled it well. I don't see a particular problem with that. But the constant shouting down when Hipkins was trying to make his way around the Otara market, that seemed to me a little bit more serious. That's akin to you cannot make your way through the shopping mall situation. I think the where I would want to try and draw a distinction would be between those people who want to engage in the democratic political process of this is the vigorous exchange of ideas, and we might be going to shout at each other, but we are going to have this done in a way that where all sides will respect that we're engaged in this for democratic outcomes, and people who don't buy into that, who actually want to tear down the democratic outcomes. I chaired a session in a candidates debate in a church a couple of weeks ago, and the vicar at the church told me a week or so before it was on that she had organised security for the night, and so there were security guards on the door, and I thought, what? And actually what happened in the meeting was that there were 4 different parties represented. They all turned up with their crews. It was very boisterous, very noisy. Everybody got cheers and boos and all the rest of it, and it was very exciting, and it was a terrific night. And that seemed to me to be the way it should go. You don't need to be quiet and submissive. You can be as boisterous and noisy and do all of that. And people got booed when they said stupid things, or things that other people thought were stupid and so on. But it didn't get to the stage of, we're just not going to listen to you at all. We're just not interested in what you got to say. We're just going to shut you down. It didn't get.
So if the protest is a part of the conversation, almost, it seems okay. If it's just really there to be, I don't know, difficult, to push back for no reason, to make noise without purpose, can we define what that is? Though, how do we decide that?
That's the first point. The second point is, and you mentioned Posey Parker before. There's an imbalance in a lot of these things. Posey Parker's purpose here was, in my view, possibly in yours, to stir up hatred against the trans community. I don't think there's any other way to look at it. And you can't just say that that's just part of the civil discourse. That's actually stirring up hatred. Right. So people have to make it really clear that stirring up hatred isn't going to be tolerated. It's a really fine line, though. It's a really hard thing to do, because
how do we know? I mean, I'm not suggesting you're wrong. I kind of think you're right, but there's also that adage of, it's the people who win the war that write the books. Like when we're saying it's stirring up hatred, others are saying it's not, and we can't assume that we're always going to be 100% right in our life and our decisions. So how do we know? How do we make this? That's where I guess those free speech periods, although there's no such thing as a free speech period, to go, it's either all or nothing. That's when they do that.
Yeah. It's the old classic Marxist approach to it used to be, well, if you're on the right side, then you've got the rights, and if you're on the wrong side, we're going to shut you down. We know that's wrong. We know that's wrong now. You can't have a vigorous democracy if you're simply going to assume that actually on one side everyone's right, and on the other side everyone's wrong, and therefore it's okay to oppress them. You can't do it like that. So it becomes more complicated. I think in this country now, and we're not alone, I think we need to put a high premium on civic respect, if you like. We need to be aware that there are people out there who are looking for the opportunity to be violent, who are looking for the opportunity to enrage other people who are enraged themselves. And I think we've got to resist that with respect. I think we've got to keep asserting that it's important to have a discourse. I'm doing a debate in a few weeks' time with people who I find completely obnoxious, but I'm going to do it because actually I'd rather talk to them than throw things at them. And they might throw things at me, and we'll see how that goes. But
what do you
reckon? But I'd rather have the talk.
What do you reckon, Chewy? Me and Simon have been yabbering away for a bit.
I'm going to preface this by saying, everything that Vision NZ or whatever they're calling themselves today runs completely in the opposite direction from what I believe. I have a problem with them being called protesters, though, because they are a registered party. They have a candidate,
political operatives.
Yeah, so I mean, calling them protesters doesn't really cut it. They had the billboards. They were running a rally at the same time that Hipkins was. And yeah, I don't see a problem with that. There's a couple of people in the chat that have pointed out that there seems to be like a real disconnect between what they did with Hipkins and interrupting a press conference. Like, a press conference is a more organized sort of thing. Formal? It's not a debate, or it's not a debate or whatever.
People do interrupt press conferences, though. I mean, I've been in those media stand-ups a lot as media, and members of the public turn up and kind of ask their own questions and
throw dildos.
And that too. And usually there are managers there to try and manage that, but it happens. And if politicians are going to stand up in a public place and pontificate, the public has the right to be there. It's how the politician wants to do it. The Otara Market thing, that's a popular place in Auckland for political debate in election times, and I've been there often at election time. And what usually happens is that there's the Labour Party, there's Te Pāti Māori, there's the Greens, there's National, they're all there, and they're all got their stalls out, and they're all got a loud hailer, and they're all doing their business, and they don't come face to face usually. They like all the other stall holders in the market, they attempt to sell their wares and get people to buy from them, but they do it at their stall.
That might imply what Chippy. It's also the best place to get chop suey in all of Auckland. It also therefore maybe that comes back to what Chippy said, is if these people had a chance of getting in, they probably wouldn't be doing it. The people that are, let's say, professionally aligned with politics adhere to sort of the unwritten rules. The people who aren't actually in politics, they're just going to be like, fuck it, I'll do whatever I want, and this is what I want to do. Maybe.
I think the other aspect of it, and this is, I guess, my rebel side coming through, right? You're trying to take on the two biggest, most established political parties in the debate, right? You're not going to get the press to pay any attention to you because you're a fringe group run by a madman. So yeah, why not insert yourself into their settings? It's got them press. It's worked. You're absolutely right. They led the news last night. I think you're right about that. It is really difficult. And that's what I said before. The guy leaning over the fence and engaging in a pretty almost witty way with Luxon, who engaged wittily back with him, doesn't worry me at all.
Wow.
The people who shout down politicians so they can't be heard and are only interested in doing that, and that worries me more.
The worst part about that guy living over the fence was it allowed Luxon to make a joke about Eminem, showing him some kind of relative knowledge about an artist whom I love, and making him a little bit more like of a real person, as opposed to thinking, oh, he listens to music from the 50s.
So can you explain this to me? When he said, you're no Slim Shady,
it's a song from Eminem.
I know it is. I absolutely know it. Yeah. But is that what he meant? I mean, what did he mean?
That would absolutely make it better, right? If he said that line and then turned back to the press and goes, I am, of course, referring to Eminem, the rapper. And just explain himself a little bit.
I wonder if Luxon knows more about Eminem now because of the court case at the last election where they got sued by Eminem. Maybe that's where they started their knowledge.
That's what he might have been talking about.
Hey, let me ask you something else, and this is a bit of a diversion, but based around that interaction. Is Simon, probably with you as well, but me and Chewie have been talking about all these dilemmas that Luxon has. One of the one around abortion and its Christianity. We heard that protester, that Freedom Vision New Zealand candidate, say to him, I thought you were a Christian, you're doing nothing about abortion, you're doing nothing about trans people. And we're like going, I wonder if at any stage Luxon has to pick between what his religious beliefs might be and what a secular government should be, how that will pan out. Because you can see there is a sector of the Christian world who are going, you should be doing this more Christian-y, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to be a problem for him, Simon?
I think it is always going to be a problem for him. And I don't understand Chris Luxon's Christianity because the church he is said to belong to is relatively fundamentalist. But there's not much he does or says in his political life that reflects that. So is he being a hypocrite? Or did he belong to that church because it's just what he thought was the right thing to do at the time, and he's moved on? He's never explained this, and it would be great if he did explain it. We do know that in his party, if you look at his party list for this coming election, there are quite a lot of fundamentalist Christians on that list in reasonably good places. Agnes Lahini is there. Agnes Lahini was the only MP that I know of who turned up to the Nigel Farage meeting in Auckland a few years ago when Farage came out shortly before COVID struck. She was there to hear him, and she was a national MP at the time as a list MP. I was at the botany selection meeting when Luxon was selected for that seat, and Agnes Lahini was one of the people who stood against him, wanted that candidacy. And she talked long and hard in her election speech about her values and the party's values, and she aligned her fundamentalist Christian values with the National Party's values in a way that made them indistinguishable. It was astonishing. Now, she didn't get the nod, which maybe tells you something, but she was clearly to the right of Luxon in that fundamentalist Christian sphere. It's not the only kind of Christianity, of course. But there she was, and she's going to be back in Parliament, and she won't be the only one. It is odd that Luxon, while he talks about a whole lot of things that are nothing to do with any of the fundamentalist Christian values he's supposed to adhere to, it's odd that he does belong to that church still, and he hasn't explained himself.
What I hear you saying is it's almost like either his Christianity means nothing because there's no outworking of it in his politics, or his politics means nothing because it doesn't align with perhaps his fundamentalist views. It's what I'm saying. It would be great for him to explain this because it doesn't make sense. He's not the first. He's not the first. I was going to say he's not the first. You remember Bill English? Bill English, staunch Catholic. Absolutely staunch Catholic. So these are politicians who vote against progressive issues, and then when they get passed anyway, marriage equality is a good example. Turns out not to be an issue, not to be a problem, and they never raise it again. Luxon has made it very clear he is not going to put, or says he's not going to put abortion back on the list for reconsideration. I don't know. He also said he personally believes it's murder. If you think something's murder, aren't you morally obliged to try and not do it? Especially if you're in a position to change people from murdering other people.
It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Chewy?
I mean, he's so close to having a position. He just just give him time. We've just got to get to know the guy, right? But yeah, I mean, you bring up Bill English. That's a perfect example, right? He made it very clear that he was voting this way because of his faith, but at the same time, he acknowledged that people had a personal choice. I think he was much more coherent in this than Luxon is, where he's kind of like, well, guys,
Luxon just won't talk about it. Yeah,
turn to pink, and it's almost like I think back to Judith Collins doing that performative prayer thing for the cameras last
the
election.
kneeling.
Yeah, that a lesson hasn't been learned here, that stuff just does not play with the general electorate. And you can look at the stats of what religion, people that consider themselves religious or that sort of thing. It's not a growing market. It's something that will turn off so many people. But some of them seem to be leaning into it in almost an American fashion, and it seems to be from that very American flavored fundamentalists.
Well, I think that's right. I think they're leaning into it because there's a constituency there, and especially after Labor, who want to kill every baby at 8 months and 14 days and that kind of stuff. That they're looking for. I mean, I've sat in churches where when John Key was coming in and heard from the front that John Key is God's choice. I've heard it in churches, and I always say to people who say that, well, was God off at the last election when Helen Clark got in? Did God take that election off? Because if this is God's choice, then what? He wasn't powerful enough to do it last time around. I don't get it. So that's out there, and it's a voting block, Chewy. So that's what I think it's probably primarily a voting block.
You're down in the weeds of the really difficult issue of God's making choices. Then how come he's choosing our sports team and not yours, and yours and not ours, and all of that? It obviously doesn't make sense.
Really interesting.
I think back that there was what was it? Must have been Band of Brothers or Saving Private Ryan or something. They bring that up as well. God's on our side, right? And the Germans think that the God's on their side. So which one is it? I guess we'll find out.
I'm just going to say this becomes potentially dangerous if those hard right protest, is it, Cherie? Okay, not protesters, those hard right political activists are intent on trying to crash the democratic process. If that's what they're trying to do, because God is on their side, this is going to be a really difficult next few weeks. It's really hard because we do want to preserve the idea that you can have vigorous political debate in public, live. People can meet politicians. Politicians should be able to walk down the street and meet members of the public without feeling that they're going to be attacked.
Yeah, maybe if you push it too far, Rob Muldoon will punch you in the stomach. You know?
We don't live in those days anymore, do we? You know, I mean, it's different now. You know, I mean, I think
was a union organizer that
called
him Peggy or something like that.
Yeah, we all now need to know people are people. They're not pigs. They're not animals. They are people, and we all need to know that politicians have the right to feel safe, because then we can have democracy functioning well.
Do you think just with how people are post-COVID, you know, everybody seems to be just a little bit off kilter, people getting angrier quicker, we've seen people go down the rabbit hole and just really extreme beliefs. Do you think it's a combination of that, what would have been seen pre-COVID of a little bit of a political party just having a little bit of cheek and poking their head over the fence, and now we're thinking, well, you know, next time is it going to be an armed mob comes up and decides to solve something? You know, we look at voices for fuckwits and that sort of thing and go, well, those guys want to make our process completely ungovernable. So where's the line?
We're looking at something else that's happening here. It's not just the COVID frustrations and anger and everyone's a bit more short-tempered and all of that. We all know that's happening. We're also looking at an American-inspired, calculated attack on democracy. And we see that happening in America, and we know the links are there to the groups in this country. And it's pretty frightening.
And to the right wing echo chambers that are also doubling down, and that's why you see, like what we're doing right now, 4 or 5 versions of what we're doing on the right in New Zealand, all massively funded, massively.
That's
funded.
right. Yeah, that's right. And the thing is, the weapons at our disposal are civility and speech and behaving decently to each other and doing all that. And you know, that's what I'd like to think. It's harder to do it that way. It's much easier to just shout everybody down to become violent eventually.